Welcome and thank you for joining today's FY 2024 Small Rural School Achievement Grant Application Webinar Session 2. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all attendee lines are currently muted to minimize background noise. Before we do get started, please just make sure you've opened your chat panel by clicking the WebEx chat icon. It looks like a chat bubble at the bottom right corner of your screen. If you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please feel free to send your chat questions through the chat to all panelists. With that, I'd like to formally begin today's call and turn it over to Leslie Pointer, REAP Team Group Leader. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Silas, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second fiscal year 2024 Small Rural School Achievement, or SRSA, grant application webinar. Our team, the Rural Education Achievement Program, or the REAP team at the U.S. Department of Education, are joining you today for the webinar. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. We know you may still have questions about the SRSA application, and we hope that you will learn more about that process today for applying for the Small Rural School Achievement, or again, as we call it, the SRSA grant. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, here's some introductions. So if I don't know you, my name is Leslie Pointer, and I serve as the REAP group leader. And I am joined today by my colleagues on the REAP team, Alice Kinney, Eric Scholes, Justin Tabor, Robert Hitchcock, and Stacy Cummins, who all serve as program officers and work to support our rural grantees, as well as by Abigail Swisher, who is currently working with our team as the department's Rural Impact Fellow. So thanks to the full team for joining. Let's go ahead to the next slide. We are going to be recording today's webinar, and we will post the recording along with the slides to our REAP website. We post recordings of our webinars on our REAP resources page, which we just now dropped into the chat. In terms of kind of how you can participate, your microphones and video have been disabled for the first portion of today's webinar. But throughout the webinar, we invite you to use the chat to submit questions to us by using the All Panelists function in the chat. And towards the end of our time together, we're going to turn microphones back on and have a live question and answer portion of the day. So if you'd like to ask some questions that are still unanswered, we'll have time for that at the end. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please just send a message to the event producer or call the number on the slide for WebEx support. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, if you joined us or have already viewed the first application webinar that we hosted, which was hosted last month, you're going to find that today's webinar is a little bit different from that one. So for today, we are still going to cover basic information that you'll need to determine your REAP program eligibility and to access and complete the SRSA application. But if you're looking for a more detailed general overview, I do encourage you to view the first webinar, webinar 1, which again, that's posted on our REAP resources page. Today's webinar is really intended to answer some of the most common questions that we've received regarding the REAP program. And given that focus, we're going to explore a few topics in more depth than we did in the past webinar. And like I said before, we're going to make sure there's time to answer your questions live, and we'll cover more on that in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead to the next slide. During our time together today, we have the following objectives. We hope that you will, by the end of the presentation, know how to first access the master eligibility spreadsheet, or what we call the MES, to check your LEA's eligibility and submission status. Also that you will know how to use your LEA's eligibility status to determine next steps. That you'll know how to access and complete the SRSA application. And finally, know how to contact our team if you need support or how to utilize our website for additional information. Let's go to the next slide, please. And here you'll see our brief agenda. We have the conversation today split up into 5 parts. So first, part 1, checking your eligibility using the MES. Part 2 is going to cover some program basics about the REAP program. Part 3 is the fiscal year 2024 SRSA application overview. In part 4, we'll talk through some next steps and resources, and we will round things out again with your attendee questions. Let's go to the next slide. Before handing the presentation over to Robert, I'd like to just go over a few common acronyms that we're going to be using today. I'm not going to cover all of them. You can see them there on the slide. One that I will highlight is that we use LEA to mean Local Educational Agency. And the LEA is the grantee for SRSA. We get that question frequently. And so by attending this webinar, we assume that each of you are a representative for an LEA that's been invited to apply for the SRSA grant this season. We're going to cover more of these acronyms as we proceed through today's presentation. But I want to head over to the next slide, slide 8, which is our polling slide. And now I'm going to ask our producer to please launch our first poll. You're going to have 1 minute to answer this question, which we're using as a bit of a temperature check for today's webinar. So when that pops up, you're going to see that the question, there it is, asks you to please identify which of the following tasks you feel confident performing. So please select the tasks that you do feel confident to perform. These are some of the common tasks related to topics that we're going to cover during today's webinar. And your honest responses are going to help us to make sure that our presentation reinforces the topics where you need some support. So we're asking you to comment on your confidence in first using the MES to determine your LEA's eligibility status, determining allowable uses of SRSA funds, completing the SRSA application, writing a GEPA statement, contacting SAM.gov for UEI support, contacting the REAP team for application support, and contacting G6 for support accessing your funds. I see someone saying they can't access the polls, but hopefully that is pulling up for you soon.
You may have to click the icon that says Slido on the right side of your screen for the poll to open up. It is going to be right next to your participants and chat panel on the right side of your screen.
It's interesting to see as these results are coming in. It is looking like people are feeling confident in using the MES, or at least about 60% or so, contacting our team. The areas where it's looking like people could use some more support is completing the application. So you are in the right place, as well as writing a GEPA statement. Again, we'll cover that one today too. So we appreciate you sharing that. I think that might be open for a minute, maybe closing pretty soon here, but that data is going to be really helpful for us. And we're going to revisit those same questions at the end of today's webinar too. At this point, we're going to move into our formal presentation. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Robert to talk about the master eligibility spreadsheet. Thanks, Robert. Confirming that, Robert, you're on. If you're on mute.
Maybe Robert is having a technology hiccup.
I think that might be what's going on.
Okay, well, if
I can see Robert now.
I am not seeing Robert.
I will send Robert a chat just in case he's having audio issues and not able to hear.
We want to go ahead. I can start Robert's portion while we're waiting for him to get together.
Sure, Justin, why don't you go ahead with that?
You able to hear me now?
Robert, yes, we can hear you. Perfect, Robert. We'll turn it to you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. And thanks for starting us off. So in this part of the presentation, I'll be going over the master eligibility spreadsheet, or the MES. So we're starting with the MES as it is the key tool for understanding what steps you will need to take in the coming months. So next slide, please. So the MES is REAP's online public spreadsheet, which is posted in mid-January and is currently being updated on a weekly basis. So it includes a great deal of information, as you can see from this slide, and we encourage everyone to access the MES and to check out their LEA's data, especially for accuracy. And you might want to check on your application submittal status there as well. So on the MES, you can find all of these key pieces of information that you see on the slide, and you can access the MES by proceeding to the SRSA eligibility page and downloading the file. So you can find a link to that is being posted right now in the comments. So next slide, please. Some of the most relevant information on the MES is located in columns L through R on the All LEAs tab, and these columns indicate which REAP programs an LEA qualifies for and the estimated award amount. In column R, you can also find your application status, which gets updated online weekly, and you can see this on screenshot 4 of the most common eligibility determinations. So LEAs have been labeled here as A, B, C, and D. So LEA A is only eligible for the SRSA program. They'll need to fill out an SRSA application to receive an estimated award amount of about $34,000. LEA B is only eligible for RLIS and will receive an estimated $37,000, though they do not need to complete an SRSA application since they are not eligible for that program. Finally, LEAD is dual eligible, or excuse me, LEAC is dual eligible with 2 different award amounts. So in our next section, Alice is going to cover what this will mean for the LEA, but they may or may not need to complete an application. So generally, this LEA would want to apply for SRSA since it is estimated to receive more funding through that program. And finally, LEAD, so also dual eligible, so eligible for SRSA and RLIS, but because of that $0 award in the SRSA column, they will automatically be enrolled in RLIS, and no further action would be needed at this time. And that's due to how the formula works for SRSA. So next slide, please. So we'll cover some of the most common MES questions. First, what are some of the common reasons why an LEA's estimated award amount would change from year to year? So last year, the LEA may have been dual eligible. This year, it's only RLIS eligible. So eligibility criteria can be found on the REAP, SRSA, and RLIS eligibility pages, and we'll post that in the chat real quick now. Rural designations and state rural definitions are annual determinations along with ADA, average daily attendance, county population densities, and other poverty metrics. So because these are updated annually, eligibility can change from year to year. Another question might be, one of our contacts is not correct, and how do we change this? So in this case, please send an email to your reap@ed.gov, letting us know that your LEA name and NCSID, who the old contact who's being replaced is, and the name and email of the new primary or secondary contact. And please do let us know your LEA name and NCSID, as it's very helpful to let us know which district it is that you're referring to. So the next question might be, when will the FY2024 master eligibility spreadsheet, MES, be updated to reflect my LEA's application status? So when you submit your application, the primary contact who received the initial invitation email should get a confirmation email that contains all your responses. And this is your first indication that the application was submitted correctly. If you'd like to be doubly sure that you have your application on file, you can check column R of the MES. So we'll update this information early each week. So please allow up to 10 days from the date of your application submission to see if this is reflected on the spreadsheet. If the status does not change after 10 days, please do contact us at reap@ed.gov. Now I'll turn it over to Alice to discuss the REAP policy and program requirements. Thank you.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here with you all, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and discuss, starting on slide 13, our REAP policy and programmatic information. I imagine for most of you, this will be a bit of an overview of information you may have already heard before, but it's great to get a review, and we hope that this information can be helpful. Now that you've been refreshed by Robert on how to access and use the MES, as well as check for your specific LEA's SRSA and RLIS eligibility, as well as award estimates, we are going to move into talking through some of the important policy and programming requirements associated with REAP. Next slide, please. So the Rural Education Achievement Program, which is the federal grant office known as REAP, oversees two formula grants, the Small Rural School Achievement, or SRSA grant. We now have heard that many times today already, but we also oversee the Rural and Low Income School, or RLIS grant. In the previous webinar, we discussed the types of data that goes into determining whether an LEA is eligible for SRSA, RLIS, or both. So I know Robert gave a brief overview. We won't be going into too much detail on that, but we do recommend that you check out the MES, take a look at your individual LEA's data that determines your eligibility for our two REAP grant programs. And of course, if you want to get more in the weeds on this data, take a look at our recording and the slides that go along with our first SRSA application webinar. That's going to be posted online on our website. Next slide, please. So here, as you can see in this graphic, REAP has been appropriated approximately $220 million for fiscal year 2024. We are excited to announce that this is a $20 million increase from fiscal year 2023. We love to see that. We love to have more dollars available to allocate to all of our districts. After going through the eligibility determination process based on data that was provided by each of your state educational agencies, as well as the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES, eligible LEAs are sorted into two programmatic cohorts, RLIS and SRSA. So you'll see those two bubbles on the screen. There are LEAs right there in the middle that meet the requirements for both RLIS and SRSA criteria, and we call those dual eligible LEAs. This year, there are about 1,600 dual eligible LEAs, so it is not all that uncommon to find yourself in a dual eligible situation. While these districts do qualify for both programs, dual eligible LEAs must choose which of the two they will participate in for that fiscal year. You can only select one program in a given fiscal year. As was mentioned earlier, dual eligible LEAs that have a $0 SRSA award estimate will automatically be moved into the RLIS cohort. Dual eligible LEAs that wish to accept their SRSA award must complete the SRSA application, which I'm sure you all have received a link and know something about. A dual eligible LEA that does not submit an SRSA application will automatically be placed into the RLIS cohort. LEAs in the RLIS cohort do not need to complete a federal application with the U.S. Department of Education because, as we see in this graphic, their funds are administered by their state educational agency. LEAs who are in the SRSA cohort do need to complete a grant application to receive SRSA funds, and they receive those funds directly from us here at the federal level with the U.S. Department of Education through the grant management system known as G5, or more recently, G6. They are transitioning. To reiterate one of the key takeaways from this slide, if you are an LEA who wants to receive RLIS because you're dual eligible, you do not need to complete an application for the SRSA grant with the U.S. Department of Education. If you're dual eligible and you wish to receive SRSA funding for fiscal year 2024, you do need to fill out the SRSA application as soon as possible. That is due on May 10th. An LEA cannot receive funding under both, so it is important that you take a look at the data, your estimated award allocations, and make a selection between the two programs if you are dual eligible. Let's go ahead to our next slide. Here we can see some of the important pieces of information relating to REAP program funding requirements and flexibilities. In our previous webinar, again, we spent a lot of time talking on this topic, so if you're curious, I definitely recommend that you go back and take a look at the recording of our first SRSA application webinar for fiscal year 24, or take a look at the slide deck included there if you want to get a little bit more in depth on this topic. We have also recently updated our REAP Uses of Funds Guide. which is posted on our website, and Abigail's going to drop that link in the chat. This is an excellent resource for you to explore as your district determines how best to utilize your SRSA grant funds. Our first bullet point here covers the different uses of fund options that LEAs have for their SRSA or RLIS award. Now, in many cases, the RLIS and SRSA programs have the same funding opportunities, but I do want to highlight the one place where they differ slightly. So RLIS funds can be used for what are termed parental involvement activities, which is not actually a specific category for SRSA fund use. Alternatively, SRSA funds can be used for Title IV Part B activities, which is not included under RLIS. So there is a slight difference there. And if you are a dual eligible LEA trying to decide between the two programs, that's going to be an important thing to keep in mind. The second bullet on this slide is a reference to the Alternative Fund Use Authority, which we call an acronym AFWA. AFWA gives eligible LEAs authority to spend the Title II Part A and Title IV Part A funds that LEA receives on activities authorized under the SRSA program. In other words, it essentially allows you to use your Title II Part A and Title IV Part A funds as if they are SRSA dollars. The authority is specifically designed to give small rural LEAs greater flexibility in spending their federal funds. But do note that AFWA flexibilities extend to all SRSA eligible LEAs, even those who have $0 awards and automatically go with RLIS, as well as the dual eligible LEAs who choose between the two programs and select RLIS instead of receiving funds under SRSA. As long as you're eligible for SRSA, you have the option to exercise AFWA. Finally, and this is a commonly asked question, so listen carefully, SRSA fund usage can be changed by an LEA at any point in the performance period, as long as the activity is allowable under one of the covered SRSA title programs. As part of the SRSA application process, LEAs must state their intended use of funds, but that does not lock you into that plan. Here at the REAP office, we certainly recognize that a lot can change between when you apply for grant funding to when you actually receive those dollars and start using them. LEAs have the flexibility to spend their SRSA funding on any allowable activities without even informing us here at the U.S. Department of Education. That being said, the REAP team is here to help you if you are not certain whether a particular use of funds is or isn't allowable, and we're happy to provide some support. So just send us an email at reap@ed.gov anytime. Let's go ahead to our next slide. And here we're going to look at some of the frequently asked questions that we receive related to just general rural education achievement program information, as well as SRSA and RLIS. So the first question we have here is, can you explain the relationship between REAP, SRSA, and RLIS? A lot of acronyms going on. We understand that that's confusing. This is a common point of confusion among our grantees. And as you have heard throughout today's webinar, REAP, which stands for Rural Education Achievement Program, is the federal formula grant office. So they sit above the two programs, SRSA and RLIS. There are two formula grant programs, and again, those fall under REAP, so SRSA, RLIS. Again, that's Small Rural School Achievement Grant and the Rural and Low Income School Grant. Eligible LEAs will either receive an SRSA grant award or an RLIS grant award, but you don't actually receive a REAP award. That being said, our team is always here to help, and we will definitely know what you mean if you ask about your REAP funding. Question number 2 asks if there are any benefits for dual eligible LEAs to consider when choosing between RLIS or SRSA funding. We recognize that each LEA has a unique landscape of factors to consider. This includes if there is a preference to receive funds directly from the U.S. Department of Education and utilize the G5/G6 platform, or perhaps you're more comfortable receiving funding directly from your state educational agency as a subgrant. That's something to keep in mind. We also emphasize that the dual eligible LEAs should take a look at their MES data, and you'll actually be able to see and review estimated award allocations for each of the programs you're eligible for. That's usually the number one way a district will decide in order to receive and maximize their amount of funding. We have a very comprehensive guide on all of this for our dual eligible LEAs. That's linked on our website, and Abigail's going to put that in the chat for everyone to view. So if you are a dual eligible LEA, take a look, see if that website helps you make a decision. And if you need any further guidance, we're always happy to help. Our third question is another common one and can play out in a number of scenarios. Essentially, in this question, an LEA is dual eligible. Last year, it was estimated to receive more under SRSA, so it applied and received SRSA funding in 2023. Now, fiscal year 2024 rolls around, and looking at the MES, it realizes it would receive more funding under RLIS. So this LEA wonders if it can switch back and forth between these two grant programs, or whether this would impact access to each year's award. So we do want to emphasize that in this case, the LEA can opt for RLIS in 2024, even though they selected SRSA in the prior year. Switching between the grant programs will not have any access or any impact on accessing already awarded funds. Again, the major difference an LEA will experience by going between programs is the distribution of funds. So that means SRSA is coming from us here at the federal level in G5, G6, and RLIS would be going to you from your state educational agency. That being said, you will want to be extra careful if you choose to switch back and forth between programs so that you keep track of where the funding is available, how much funding remains, the obligation deadlines associated with each award. You don't want to lose track of where those funds are housed, but they will be there waiting for you. Okay, that wraps up this portion of the webinar. I'm now going to pass it over to Justin, who will be sharing an overview of the SRSA application process. So Justin, I'll turn it to you and we can go ahead to that next slide.
Thanks, Alice, for going over those policies. In my portion of today's presentation, we're going to be going over a very high-level overview of the process of applying for an SRSA award. And as Alice mentioned, for those LEAs who are only eligible for RLIS funds, there is no federal application. So these next steps that I'm going to be talking about are really only for those interested in their SRSA funds. And if you would like a more detailed dive into the SRSA application, we have that previous recording available where we even have screenshots and everything. And so if you would like to see that in greater detail, again, that's on our resources page. So let's go to the next slide, please. So there's sort of three major phases to the SRSA application. The first, obviously, being that you need to receive an invitation to apply. As was asked in the chat, our first round of invitations went out on April 1st. And we actually sent a reminder set of emails out yesterday that also included the link to apply. The authorized representative or the primary contact of each SRSA eligible LEA should have received that email, which would have come from the U.S. Department of Education from no-reply.survey@max.gov, and that email invites the primary contact to apply. So if your LEA is struggling to locate that application link and that email, we're going to post some instructions in the chat now for how to track that down. But that email contains identifying information about your LEA, such as the name, address, estimated award, and which programs you qualify for. So it's a really helpful email to have. That email, most importantly, includes the unique link to your application. And clicking that link will take you into a platform called Max Survey, where you actually answer questions and submit your application. And then when you're looking at the email, towards the bottom of that invitation email, you'll also see some useful links and resources, a lot of which are also being included today in the presentation, just in case you need to do further research before you submit. Really remember to check your spam folders if the primary contact listed on the master eligibility spreadsheet cannot locate this email. And if you continue to lose the link, and you may You may continue to use the link if you lose your connection, time out, you need a bathroom break, lunch break, you need to stop and come back. You can close the window, click the link again, and you'll be taken back to where you were in the survey. Next, we have phase 2 here, which is the actual filling out of the SRSA application. On average, that takes about 10 to 30 minutes, and there's 5 sections to the application, which you see bulleted there on the screen. In the first section, you're basically confirming contact details, UEI numbers, and we have pre-populated that UEI number into the application, and that's if your LEA previously provided the UEI to us. If your UEI number is not pre-populated in that blank, the person completing the application will need to enter that UEI number so that we can start tracking on it for your award. If the UEI provided is not correct in the field, please update it and make it correct so that we are tracking on the correct UEI number. If that field is blank, then that means we don't know your UEI, and so you need to put it in there so we can track it for you. If it's blank and you don't have a UEI, you will need to probably pause the application, go to www.sam.gov and obtain a UEI number for your LEA. We recently hosted a whole webinar on UEI numbers and registrations and validations, and that is going to be available on our resources page as well. And then as a final note on UEIs, all LEAs will need a UEI that is registered and active in SAM.gov in order to receive their SRSA funds, which will hit your accounts in July. Okay. So then after you select next at the bottom of the page, finishing up the LEA information confirmation, you'll be taken to part 2, which is about the GEPA statement. And if we rewind back to the poll that we did, the GEPA statement is where people sort of felt like they had the least amount of confidence. I'm going to spend some time on that. So sort of the textbook definition, Section 427 of the General Education Provision Act, or GEPA, requires that department grantees, such as SRSA grantees, requires you to describe the steps that the grantee will take to ensure equitable access to and participation in the federally assisted program by addressing special needs of students, teachers, and other program beneficiaries. This provision allows the applicant the discretion of developing the required description. The statute highlights 6 types of barriers that can impede equitable access or participation, and those are gender, race, national origin, color, disability, or age. So based on local circumstances, an LEA should determine whether these or other barriers might prevent students, teachers, or other program beneficiaries from such access or participation in the federally funded project or activity. So basically, in more common language, a GEPA statement is an explanation of how your LEA will ensure equitable access to and participation in the SRSA program by addressing a barrier that could impede equitable access and participation. The barriers that are of note, again, are gender, race, national origin, color, disability, or age, but you could identify other barriers that are relevant to the project that you have in mind. We try and make this easy for you. So if your LEA submitted a GEPA statement as part of your FY23 SRSA application, then you will see a copy of that GEPA statement in this year's application. You should review that previous GEPA statement thoroughly, determine if it still meets your needs, and you could edit it, reuse it based on how you determine that. It is possible that your LEA's FY23 GEPA statement may need to be edited, especially to remove an intended use of funds. We no longer want you to say what the use of funds is, and that will be submitted in the next section of the application. And then if your LEA did not submit an FY23 SRSA application, then that text box is going to be blank, and you will need to submit a new GEPA statement written in a moment. The third part of the application is probably where the biggest change is this year, and that's the use of funds question. And previously, this had been a narrative question where we asked you to tell us a little bit about how you were going to use your SRSA funds. I will say this year we are using a checkbox approach, and this is sort of a change. Hopefully it makes it easier to answer this question. What's really important here to remember about the use of funds question is that this is a non-binding question. It is used only to gauge your intention at the time of the application. And as such, your response is not confirmed at the end of the survey. So if you want to remember what your intended use of funds was at the time of filling out the application, then you need to write that down because it will not be confirmed to you. In the last part of the application, you will be asked to read and agree to some assurances. Then you sign, date, and submit. And the application is submitted. After the application is submitted, the primary contact who received that initial invitation email will receive a confirmation email that contains a record of all the responses. That email also contains a link to our post-award document. And that post-award document is a really helpful resource that contains so many links that are helpful to the future administration of your grant. Now, Robert mentioned earlier, you can confirm that your SRSA application was submitted by following some instructions that we're going to put in the chat, and you can do that using the MES that was mentioned. After submitting your SRSA application, we go into the post-award space. Here, we just really want to make sure that you stay aware of your UEI number and make sure that your team maintains payee access in G6, but we're going to talk more about G6 and UEI numbers in a moment. So let's go on to the next slide, please. And I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions here. First, what do I do if I need to make a change to the information submitted on my LEA's application? If the information that you submitted as part of the FY24 application is no longer accurate, for example, there's been a change of the address, contact information changes, you don't like your GEPA statement, something like that, please email reap@ed.gov as soon as possible. It is important to include in your email the name and address of your LEA as well with the description of what needs to be updated. Once you submit, you are not able to go back into the survey and change things. We have to do that for you. So please really make sure that you like your answers when you hit submit. Second question, I forgot to print the application before closing the browser. How can I get a record of what I wrote down? Remember, after you hit that submit button, Mac Survey, the software, will automatically generate a confirmation email. And that confirmation email contains a record of your responses, and that is sent to the primary contact who received the initial invitation email. Finally, last question. I am the administrator for multiple districts or LEAs. Do I get one application or multiple? So each SRSA eligible LEA listed on the MES will receive a unique application invitation email. That email will say at the very top which LEA is associated with that email. If you're the primary contact for multiple LEAs, then you should expect multiple emails. You can confirm that you are the primary or secondary contact by accessing the MES. I'm going to pass over to Eric, who's going to go over some of the next steps. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin, and good afternoon, everybody. We're going to spend the next couple of slides here going over some useful next steps as well as some useful resources for you here. So as we finish up here before we get to the Q&A, we just want to review some of these things that we hope you'll find helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, what you're looking at here is a graphic that shows the relationship between SAM, the System for Award Management, our G6 system here at the department, and you as an SRSA grantee LEA. This will hopefully help tie in all of the information that you've gotten from both Justin and Alice and Robert previously. As you may have heard, the department's G5 grant system is undergoing an upgrade. We now know that as G6, that's the official name. And while we're in this transition period, you may see references, and you've probably seen them already, to either G5 or G6. G5 and G6 are interchangeable for your purposes, okay? But moving forward with this particular presentation, I'm going to reference G6, okay? We want to emphasize, and Justin talked about this as well, there's a real need on your end to avoid any delays in your ability to get to your money. You will need to make sure that you've maintained an active UEI in that SAM system, the System for Award Management. That UEI will enable you as an SRSA grantee If you have the payee access, you can go into G6 and draw down those funds whenever you need them. So it's important to avoid any delays that you keep that UEI active in SAM. And regularly checking that status in SAM, as well as your payee access in G6, will ensure that there aren't any delays, as we've talked about. And as was mentioned, what we want to do, keep that UEI annually renewed. We regularly send out reminders to each of you regarding your UEI status, but it's a great idea to incorporate this idea of UEI renewal into your existing to-do list or work plan that you may have there at your district to avoid any unnecessary delays. Another thing we want to mention, we've recently hosted a webinar with the UEI team from the General Services Administration. General Services Administration runs the SAM system. So we sat down with them, and their guidance, which I think is going to be really useful to you all, they encourage all of our UEI holders to consider appointing a backup UEI entity administrator. Abigail's going to provide a link here in the chat that shows you how to do just that. But having that backup is going to be a real help for you to enable to maintain that active registration in SAM. We also know on your end that staff turnover is a real challenge. As people come and go from your districts, they move on. We want to remind you to keep an eye out for your G6 account and make sure that the correct individuals have that payee access role in G6 so that they can draw the money down when you need it. Many LEAs, and we do this every year, we have a lot of our districts, a lot of our grantee LEAs still have remaining balances on those 2022 grants we made last year. So make sure that you're ready to draw down those grants when they come due and when you need to get to that money. And we also want to mention here that UEI support is available through the Federal Service Desk at fsd.gov, and G6 support can be accessed through the G6 website. We're going to have links to those resources on a later slide. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, what you're looking at here now is a checklist of next steps. These are hopefully helpful reminders of the major tasks that you're going to need to complete. First, as Justin mentioned earlier, you're going to access that master eligibility spreadsheet, the MES, and have a look at all of the great information that's there concerning your district and your eligibility. And then what you want to do is make sure you have access to the SRSA application email. Again, as Justin mentioned, that email was mailed out to your listed primary contact beginning April 1st. It would have come from that unique email address, and we know that this may be an issue for some people because it doesn't mention Department of Ed. That email address is no-reply.survey@max.gov. So if you're trying to find it, make sure you're aware that it's kind of a unique email address. We're reminding you here to make sure that you submit that application. If you follow Justin's instructions here, you need to submit that by May 10th, 2024. That's less than a month away. So time will be of the essence here to make sure you get that in. Make that a priority if you haven't already done it. And again, if you haven't already submitted or if you need to make any corrections to your application, let us know immediately. That email address that we've talked about earlier, REAP, R-E-A-P, REAP@ed.gov. It'll help us a lot to deal with your issue if you do include that application tracking number that you received when you submitted the application. That will help us to easily find that application and give you the guidance you need. And as I discussed earlier, after submitting that application, please review that UEI registration status and your G6 access to make sure that you are ready to draw down those awarded funds once we make them. We'll be making those beginning in July, and you just want to be ready so there's no delays in your ability to make use of the funds that we're awarding. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, what you're looking at is our quick links document. We've designed this document to be kind of a one-stop shop for answers to common SRSA and REAP-related questions that you might have. You can access this document on the REAP resources page, and Abigail is going to be linking that up to you here in the chat so that you can have that. Now, if you can't find an answer that you're looking for on our website, don't hesitate to contact either your program officer or you can email us directly, again, at REAP@ed.gov. We monitor that inbox on a regular basis, and we stand ready to work with you if you have any questions about that. Finally, just want to mention again that the slides and the recording from our application webinar 1 are now available on the REAP resources page on the website. We're going to be posting today's recording there and the materials from today's presentation as well. So those will be coming up soon at that same location. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, for section 4 here, we have some commonly asked questions, which we've seen in each other's sections. So we'll go right into these and I'll give you brief answers. The first question reads, if I already have payee access set up in G5, do I need to make a new account in G6? Good question, and the answer is no, you do not. Any information in G5 and the access will automatically carry over into G6. As we mentioned, those two, G5, G6 are interchangeable from your perspective. Okay. Second question is, my district is about to change superintendents before July 1. How will this affect my SRSA award? And what do I need to do to make sure it's a smooth transition? The superintendent change, if you change that person, will not affect your actual award under SRSA, but it could change how you will administer it. Specifically, if your superintendent is the listed primary contact that we have on our files for your LEA, you're going to need to email us at reap@ed.gov with the new contact name and the email as soon as you want that replacement person to start receiving any of the REAP-related correspondence and information that we send out. So if that person's not going to be taking charge for a while, you may want to stay with it. Either way, it's going to be a good idea to get us the new information as soon as possible. And if your outgoing superintendent had the payee role in G6, you're going to need to change that as well. You should not be using anybody else's contact information to get in. You're going to need to call the G6 help desk. There's a help desk number that's toll free, 888-336-8930. They will give you instructions on how to set up your new contact person with the G6 payee access. All right. Now that last question, our UEI is set to expire before July 1. Our entity administrator is about to retire. How can we make sure that UEI stays active? Well, another great question, and it kind of parallels all the transitioning issues that we've talked about. Our friends from GSA are encouraging, as we've mentioned, every UEI holder to have multiple entity administrators. The new entity administrator that's going to be coming on will need to set up an account with SAM.gov. Then the current entity administrator can use their workspace in G6 to invite, in SAM, not in G6, I'm sorry. The current entity administrator in SAM can use the workspace to invite the new user to have rights under that UEI. This process, it's easier than I'm describing, but it only should take about 10 minutes. And it's a huge safeguard having these multiple administrators. It's a huge safeguard to ensure that you never lose access to the UEI. And all UEI administrators should be aware of the date that registration will expire. And make sure you're starting that renewal process when you're prompted by SAM.gov. Again, it's a yearly renewal. It's got to be taken care of annually. All right, so that includes the resources and next steps part of the presentation. We're going to move into the Q&A session, and I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. Stacy?
Thanks, Eric. All right. So we've got some questions that have come in through the chat, and I'm going to try to answer those. But before I do that, I'm going to turn it over to the event producer to explain how to navigate WebEx during this live Q&A.
As we go into the Q&A session, you are able to submit written questions in the chat by sending them to all panelists. If you would like to ask a verbal question, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen to enter the verbal question queue. And if you are dialed into the phone only line, you can press #2 on your telephone to enter the question queue.
Thank you. I'm going to start by answering the questions that have come in through the chat. And again, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or raise your hand and you can ask your question verbally. I am going to start with contact changes. So if you are not listed as the primary contact on the MES, and you should be, please email us at reap@ed.gov.
That's how you make that contact change, is email us at reap@ed.gov. We also got some questions about when the SRSA links were sent. Those were sent on April 1st from no-reply.survey@max.gov. And a reminder was sent yesterday, April 10th. If you are the primary contact listed on the MES and you did not receive that email, please check your junk and spam folders to start. And if you still can't find that email, let us know at reap@ed.gov. We got a lot of questions about dual eligibility, so thank you for those. If you're a dual eligible LEA, you may only receive funds under one of the two programs. So you may receive funds under either SRSA or RLIS. If you would like to participate in SRSA, you complete the SRSA application. That's it. And if you would like to apply for RLIS, do not complete the SRSA application. If you're not familiar with your state's RLIS process, so that includes the application process or the reporting requirements or other requirements, for example, we highly recommend that you reach out to your REAP state coordinator, and that person will be at your state Department of Education. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat that lists those REAP state coordinators. So again, if you're not familiar with your state's RLIS process and you would like to apply to RLIS or have questions about those requirements, please reach out to your REAP state coordinator. And if your LEA is dual eligible and you're not sure whether you want to apply for SRSA or RLIS, we recommend reviewing our considerations for dual eligible page, which is on the REAP website. And I'm going to drop that as well. Okay, we got a question about accessing the application from last year. So if your LEA completed the SRSA application last year, fiscal year 2023, we pre-populate much of that information in the next year's application. So for example, who you listed as contacts or your UEI number will be pre-populated if you completed the application last year. We also recommend that applications are kept in internal records. So you can check your LEA's internal record for the application that was submitted last year. And that could be a copy of the submitted application, or it could also be the confirmation email we send once you submit the application, which includes a copy of your application responses. I think there was a question here. Yeah, so the GEPA statement, will the GEPA statement be pre-populated? If the GEPA statement was submitted, it will be pre-populated. In the event that there was not a GEPA statement submitted, it will not be. And I think that that question also came from Jeannie. And Jeannie, if there's a specific question you have about what is pre-populated, please feel free to raise your hand and come off mute, and we can talk through that. I have two more, and then I'll turn to those with hands raised. So there was a question from Danielle about a change in LEA eligibility during this current year and estimated allocations. So we do update data that is provided to us by your state, which could impact your LEA's eligibility or estimated allocation. It is possible that your LEA's eligibility or allocation changed from the start of fiscal year 2024 to right now, if we received updated data from your state. Please also know that the allocations in the MES are currently estimates, and they will remain estimates until we award funds in July. So they are subject to change and fluctuate there, and that's specific to the estimates, not eligibility. And if you are curious about your individual LEA's eligibility or allocation changes, please email us and we can look into it. So again, Danielle, I think that question came from you, and I recommend you reach out to us at reap@ed.gov with your LEA's name so we can dig into it. The last question we got from Mandy C on payee access. So I just want to clarify that all you need to access and draw down funds in G5 is that payee access. And if you requested that and it's not working, I recommend that you reach out to the G5 help desk because there may be some issue there. Maybe excuse me, your form was rejected, for example. If you haven't done that payee access process, you will need to do that. And if you're still having issues with that, you can reach out to the G5 help desk, or you can reach out to us and we can dig into it a little bit and make sure that everything is set up in G5. Okay. I cannot see, oh, I see a couple raised hands. So Shannon, let's go to you. Can you come off mute?
Yep, I've unmuted Shannon's line. You can go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So earlier in the slides at the beginning, you guys were saying that overall you had more money to award. I was wondering what determines our award from year to year, because the email that we got with, like, you know, the invitation to apply this year said that our estimated award is like 13,000 something, and that's less than half of what we received this year. So I'm wondering why there might have been such a change in our allocation.
Yeah, great question. REAP team, can one of you drop into the chat the link to the website that shows our funding allocation, please? So SRSA and RLIS funds are determined based on a statutory formula. For SRSA, it takes into account average daily attendance and your Title IIA and Title IVA allocations from year to year. So thank you, Robert, for dropping that in there. So the short answer, Shannon, is that your data changed this year, and your ADA may have changed, or your title allocations may have changed to the point where it impacts your LEA's allocation. If you want us to dig into the specifics of that, please feel free to email us at reap@ed.gov and we can look into it.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
And before we go to the next hand, there were a couple questions about allowable expenses. There are allowable activities and there are activities that are not allowable under SRSA. The big thing is you need to make sure that how you're spending your SRSA funds supplement and not supplant other local, state, and federal funds. So please keep that in mind. I recommend when looking at different allowable activities that you check out our uses of funds guide, which is on the website. And Robert, can you drop that link to the uses of funds guide in the chat as well? And if you have a specific question about what is allowable or not, and you couldn't find it in the use of funds guide, please email us at reap@ed.gov. I also want to highlight something Robert did add into the chat. Shannon, this goes to your question about allocation. So the MES does include all of the data that is necessary to determine both eligibility and allocations. So you can look at our statutory formulas and requirements, and also look at your data in the master eligibility spreadsheet and see how we determined whether or not you were eligible, as well as your allocation. Another question we got in the chat was about G5, G6, and whether you need to set up an account in G6 if you already have one in G5. The answer is no. G5 will transition to G6, so there are no action items on your end. If you've got access to G5, you are all set with G6. Okay, let's go to hand raised. Can we unmute Kylie, please?
The next question, I kind of keeping a queue here. The next one should be Livia, I think.
Great, thanks, Justin. Livia.
Yep.
Yeah, I see you just put your hand down. If you can please put your hand back up, I'll be able to unmute your line. Thank you so much. And Livia, your line is unmuted.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if there are any reporting obligations. We have not done this fund last year, so I'm just wondering if there is anything that we need to fill out on a monthly basis, or if we need to report anything at the end of the year.
There are reporting requirements, and there are requirements for records that you need to maintain internally at your LEA. for the purposes of drawing down REAP funds, for example, or excuse me, SRSA funds from G5, there's no reporting mechanism that you must do in G5 to draw down funds. So they're mostly focused on internal records. Robert, is there anything you want to add about reporting? Or anyone else on the REAP team for that matter?
Stacy, I can jump in here. Yeah, as Olivia, as Stacy mentioned, there are no reporting requirements that you as an SRSA grantee need to submit to us here at the Department of Ed regarding your performance under the SRSA grant. However, that does not relieve you of your responsibility as a grantee, as Stacy mentioned, to make sure that you're maintaining transparent source and disposition records regarding every dollar that you spend under SRSA. You have an obligation as a grantee, and that's one of the agreements that you sign to when you award this grant, that you're going to maintain adequate financial internal controls in order to track the source and disposition of every dollar that you have there. We don't need to see that on our end throughout your performance period, but you should be maintaining those internal records on your end so that anytime an auditor or anyone else comes in, it's transparent as to what and when you are spending those SRSA dollars. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, and those are federal, there are federal guidelines and regulations on records and reporting. Olivia, if you have a specific question, again, please feel free to reach out to us at reap@ed.gov.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one last hand raised, so let's go to Kylie.
Kylie, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead. Kylie, we're not.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Kylie, we're not getting any audio from your line. You may be muted on your headset or what you have connected, if you could check that.
Okay, since we're over time, Kylie, please feel free to reach out to us via reap@ed.gov with your question. I want to address a couple final questions that were in the chat about prior year master eligibility spreadsheets. Those are available on the same webpage as you can find the current year. They're on a little box on the right-hand side, so you can compare your LEA's data from year to year. I also see that there was a note about an LEA's ADM count being incorrect. So REAP actually uses an average daily attendance account, and so that's ADA, not ADM. And it is very specific to REAP. Again, there are statutory requirements regarding when that data was collected and what constitutes ADA for the purposes of REAP. So it may not be that your ADM count is incorrect. It may just not be the same as it is ADA for the purposes of REAP. Reaching out to your state coordinator is the best step there because they can confirm that the data that they have submitted to us at the department is accurate. And with that, I'm going to close this out. If we did not answer your question, we will try to get back to you, or again, please feel free to reach out to us at reap@ed.gov. And thank you all so much for attending today.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers, and thank you all in the audience for joining
Thanks,
us
everybody.
today. The call has now concluded, and you may disconnect.